Few days ago, I posted a question in Facebook. I will read out the question. Human beings suffer loneliness and seek companionship. This is a fact. But once there is company, no matter who it is, your spouse, parents, children, friends, or whoever, and no matter how much you love them, you do not like them sticking to you beyond a certain point. In fact, if it becomes extreme, you will feel repulsive. After a certain point, you will feel saturated and seek to be left alone. This is also a fact. Is this a contradiction? How do we reconcile this? What are we ultimately looking for? Companionship or aloneness? Many people responded to this, and the general theme of the answers was that there has to be a balance of companionship and being alone. After a couple of days, I myself thought over this, and then I presented my view. I posted the answer in Facebook, and I thought I will share the answer here as well. I will just read out the answer. It is not a contradiction, it is not a conflict, nor is it about balancing two things, because there are three things. There are always three things. This is the thumb rule of yoga, and it is a gradual progression from one end to another. It is not a conflict, it's a progression. Loneliness that one begins with is not the same as the aloneness that one finds himself in after getting saturated with companionship. One is a void, another is saturation. Loneliness is void, aloneness is saturation. That is how I am choosing to use these words. The movement is from black through colors to white. White may be confused to be black in that both are apparently colorless. But while black is actually colorless, white includes all colors. You begin with the void of loneliness, try to fill it with the colors of companionships, and eventually find fulfillment by turning inward, which happens alone. This is not to say that you will necessarily give up outward company, but only that turning inward is necessarily an individual affair. And seeking external solitude is an expression of that, as it is conducive. The movement, of course, is not a one-stroke event. It happens in multiple cycles. One cycle from black to white leaves a tinge of white upon us, a tinge of saturation upon us, which intensifies after each cycle. After each cycle of black to white, the prolonged aloneness again becomes loneliness, and we again go through colors, again arrive at white. A gradual increase of whiteness occurs over a period of time with each cycle. On the outside, this means the tendency of actively seeking company gradually reduces, and it converts into a sense of aloneness within. Now, aloneness may or may not involve physical solitude. Solitude is obviously conducive to make the best use of the inner situation of aloneness. Now, everyone seems to know that Krishna spoke of Karma Yoga in the Gita, but not many know that consequently he speaks of sadhana in solitude also. So if one's aloneness is growing within, solitude must be sought whenever possible and to whatever extent possible. But even with people around, the sense of aloneness of the person would anyway increase. Psychological dependency on others and the tendency of actively seeking their company will reduce. Others, of course, will find it as negative, as white will be confused as black, like they may confuse it as depression. So the person may consciously engage in active company for the sake of others, even if he or she does not need it. But sometimes the person himself, if he is not aware of all this, that there are three stages and it is not a conflict between two, he himself may think in terms of duality as colorless versus colors. And in that case, yes, it will lead to conflict. He may consider his aloneness that is growing within as something negative and try to fight it or balance it with actively engaging with people, engaging in company. And it is also possible for people to confuse their loneliness to be aloneness. White and black can be confused with each other. Sattva and tamas can be confused with each other. Therefore, as far as the inner state is concerned, it is a progression from one end to the other and not a conflict between two things that needs perpetual balancing. Loneliness leads to active seeking of company. Active seeking of company transmutes into a growing sense of aloneness, and aloneness, if properly made use of, will lead to freedom from both the need of company and the need of solitude. The balancing act, if any, is only an external issue between finding time and opportunity for solitude and company. But this balance does not mean equal or fixed proportions, and the proportions may vary from person to person. Everyone is in different degrees of inner aloneness, and there are people in all the spots in the spectrum. Some will hardly have any sense of aloneness even at the very end of their life. For such people, solitude will only lead to loneliness. There may be some others who have a strong sense of aloneness in their childhood itself, and they may prefer solitude and minimal company in their life to utilize this aloneness. As a general note, I think that all such puzzles of life have their roots in the principle of the three gunas. One of the greatest contributions of our sages is to reveal to us that life is not duality but triality. Viewing life in terms of duality, because of confusing white and black to be the same, leads to conflict as colorless versus colors. But recognizing it to be triality leads to a graceful progression from colorlessness through colors to an absolute all-inclusive color. For example, in ancient India, kavyas were written to awaken the dull mind, fill it with all the rasas, like romance, humor, anger, and eventually establish the mind in shanta rasa or serenity. Serenity is not dullness that is devoid of rasa, it is brimming aliveness that is the source of all the other rasas. As a matter of fact, shanta rasa is represented by absolute white. If one does not acknowledge this, he will be lost in the conflict between dullness and colorful rasas, colorlessness and colors, and will keep on glorifying the colorful rasas his entire life. He will never know the possibility of realizing the all-inclusive white. But if one is aware of this, he would assess himself, gracefully engage in colors, experience the colors as much as he needs, and move towards realizing white.